Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast. Going to attempt to use something that has observably happened in the past to try to provide some insight into something that could be happening in some way currently. There is definitely speculation involved in what I'm saying because direct evidence for it may be hard to find. Please excuse, I may clear my throat a few times. I also have coffee, so if that bothers you, I do apologize. But I'm going to do it anyways, so whatever. So, the thing that I want to start with is peer review. The increase in the usage of peer review in academic publishing was primarily in relation to Pergamon Press. Pergamon Press was owned by a gentleman named Robert Maxwell, who happened to have a large amount of print media as his life went by, primarily in the UK. He is known to have worked with Israeli intelligence. Now, just because things are observable facts doesn't mean there is connection between them. So I want to make sure I say that out loud so that it isn't something that is just casting aspersions or trying to fill in a void. I want to acknowledge that there is a void, but there is also some stuff that's happening that has happened that would suggest there may be some things that you can sort of see the shape of the hole, but you don't know what's in the hole. So there's something observable, but you're not 100% sure exactly what it is. So anyways, okay. Peer review was apparently initially somewhat common or existed and was being performed in medical literature. So other people were checking stuff just to make sure that it was okay. Maxwell apparently was attempting to figure out how to increase the number of academic journals that Pergamon Press could run and sell. In order to stand up a new journal, you would need a new editor, which would mean you would need to pay that editor. However, if you look at peer review, the peers that were reviewing were doing editing work, correcting work, essentially, and also seeing if something was accurate and honest. Or at least that would be the claim. That's the purpose. So, if you have a pool of peer reviewers that do it for free, then you could maybe have one editor for multiple journals, however many, and have most of the editing work being done by the peer reviewers who are doing it for free. So, if I have an identifiable free labor pool, I can then increase my profit and my ability to produce things because I don't have to put capital into it. So, there is growth in academic publication due to peer review because there is a free labor pool that is, you're relying on their predicted expertise to do a good job if you're speaking in good faith. You could simply make the case that it was a business move, but you could also consider something that has been said across time. A joke that I've heard about peer review is that it is peer preview. So the people who are technically capable of reviewing the work that you are attempting to publish in an academic journal likely have at least some similar skill sets as the person or the group that is attempting to publish the work, which means that because of how knowledge production seems to work, it is contained within very few individuals. They will produce graduate students who you could call their academic offspring, so that community can grow, but you can trace it if you know anything about a particular topic. So you know who can do similar things to you, and you may be competitive laboratories. And now a lab doesn't mean that you've got a bunch of chemistry going on or other things going on. It's a group of people working on a topic. So you can have English labs in a technical sense. So you could have English writing labs because they would be doing technical work on the written language of English. So a lab doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean one thing. It means an abstract group of people working on a particular topic. So you could have competitive labs. So I'm going to engage, and I'm going to say that it is going to be blinded review, but I'm going to engage people with technical knowledge of what I'm doing to review my work. Now, it is at least possible that sometimes there is a rejection of the paper attempting to be published, and the people who are capable of understanding what the heck is going on in that paper to review it could be essentially looking at it and saying, hey, we're going to go run this experiment really quick and we're going to find a way to publish it. So you're somewhat setting up an opportunity for others to steal your ideas. Peer review is jokingly called peer preview because you're setting up a system where it is easy for others who can do what you can do to steal your ideas and take credit because they see it before it's published. As long as it's not published, it's not real, right? It's like if there's no pictures, it didn't happen. If there's no recording, it's not real, kind of deal. So that is an automatic con of peer review. Now, does it mean it happens all the time? No, not at all. But it does happen. Now, here's another thing. If we accept that Robert Maxwell was working, whether he was an agent or whether he was affiliated with Israeli intelligence, which we have strong reason to believe, I'm pretty positive it's factual. One of the things that you would be concerned about on any intelligence gathering level or on any government level is things that are occurring in the world that you can't currently see, but could cause you harm. Scientific endeavors can cause harm, right? You can figure out how to kill people faster. It's a real thing. Now, that may not necessarily be the goal of most science. However, it could happen. If there are specific things that you want to keep an eye on as an intelligence gathering agent, you need a diffuse network for collecting information and pushing it up the chain to the decision makers when it comes across your desk. So what you could do, now I can only say that this is speculation, but it is not unreasonable speculation. So you would call it a hypothesis. This is not a theory by any stretch of the imagination. It's a hypothesis. It could be tested. It would be difficult to test because if you're a smart intelligence gatherer, you don't write stuff down. You find ways to communicate it without writing it down. Excuse me. Prior to the internet, prior to the ubiquity of current recording devices, you could probably pass information along without recording it, so there was no trace of it. With specific reference to physics, physics has the opportunity to be exceptionally dangerous for the entire human population and for any given country or any given intelligence gathering agency. So if you've got peer reviewers and a few of them happen to be affiliated with intelligence gathering operations, they will catch something, they will push it up the chain to decision makers, or they have the opportunity to do so, and they also have the opportunity to basically find ways to use that distributed network to stop that research and possibly reduce danger. So that's best case scenario, that you could be stopping danger to humanity with intelligence operatives in your peer review network, right, or your scientific network. We are at least mildly aware that governments of any given country will send citizens to another country. They will have them get education, and while they're getting that education and working in labs, they will grab the information from the labs and forward it to their governments or some government agency in their home country. This is not an abnormal thing. This is unfortunately how a pretty dirty game works. But if you want to get better at science, well, why don't you go to the people who are doing it good and steal their stuff? Right? It happens. So the scientific endeavor may very well have embedded intelligence gathering operations. Now, if you are a researcher and you have been engaged to peer review, and you peer review and you say this is a fantastic article and you push it up the chain, well, before anybody else has the opportunity to see that article, you've already seen it. You know what's going on. You can run into your lab and start an experiment and further that work so you can be on the cutting edge because you saw somebody else's stuff, not because you came to that. You saw somebody else who came to a certain concept and a certain experiment. Now you can graft from that earlier. So you might even be able to get ahead of the lab that you saw their work. You might be able to go farther than them faster. Maybe you're more well-resourced. So it's a kind of a dirty game. But there is a diffuse network of whether purposeful or accidental intelligence gathering of information to use for better opportunities and better outcomes for yourself. Okay, so that's peer review. It doesn't involve electronic communication until email and other things start to become more ubiquitous, fax networks, things like that. So as we're able to transmit information faster, then maybe you could also say the peer reviewers could be completely above board, completely deontological or duty-based, and then you could have people who could grab the stuff off of the electronic network. So now you have more opportunity for intelligence gathering, even if everybody is behaving as if they are doing their duty and being honest brokers. In all likelihood, there's some dishonest brokers. How many? I have no idea, and I can't point to it. But I can tell you that this is something that is a really normal thing. You learn from observing others. So this could be a net positive thing, or it could be used in a negative way. So the point is to say that it could be used in a negative way. Not to say I know exactly where, when, and how it's been used in a negative way. But, I mean, we see a hole in the world with respect to the transmission of information, transmission and building of knowledge that looks like there's some dirty business going on. To just take a mild tangent of what I'm trying to do, I want to express that statistics don't lie. However, you can manipulate input, or you can manipulate the analysis, and you can do an improper analysis for the data that you have. So you could try to, you have data that's legit data, it's clean data, and then you do an analysis that's improper for that data so that you can say something that that data doesn't really say. You also, this is normal, and I really hate this, I dislike this deeply, positivists believe that there is a singular reality that can be observed through appropriate experimentation, but the experimenters are always the problem. So what you want to do if you're a positivist is collect all data and see if there is a pattern, and you want to minimize the impact of the data collector or the researcher or the experimenter. You want to diffuse that through a bunch so that you could see if there's some people who rate the data one way, some people who rate the data another way. You want to be able to wash that out to some degree. I will say that the washing out of things is against the fundamentals of positivism. Positivism has to accept if there's variability between raters. Like, it just has to accept it. Or it should fundamentally. There is also the removal of outliers from data sets. So you're cleaning your data. That is where funny business happens. The other place where funny business happens in the scientific endeavor is funders. So you have to write proposals for people to release funds to you. They will only release funds to those who they believe are going to do research that will benefit them. That's how it goes. The researcher and the funder are not having, meetings in back rooms with monocles and champagne and cigars and giggling. It's not happening. But what is happening is the researchers are learning what research they should do because of what they get rejected for. So they're going to go more towards the things that are already happening, and they're going to try to kind of be in line with that, and they're going to recognize where the funding comes from. I have heard stories that round 1 funding is dispersed and round 2 funding is contingent upon the results of the initial study being in general line with what the funder wants. So they will then deploy people to clean data so that the data ends up looking like the funder wants so that they can get round 2 of funding. So there is funny business. It does happen. Okay. So you've got a diffuse network creating knowledge in researchers. You have a possible surveillance network in the form of peer review. Okay. One of the reasons you might have that is because you want intelligence gathering on that information so you can identify danger before it happens and stop it. I'm not sure that that's what's happening. Maybe what's happening is you see something dangerous and you try to steal it before anybody else can do it. You try to win that race. That might be happening. Okay. Now, with respect to a diffuse data collecting network, you now have artificial intelligence. Please excuse me as I take a sip. So AI requires large data sets to work in the manner in which a neural network or a deep learning network will work. Then you end up having primarily initially large language models for output in the form of statistical regularity and statistical prediction of what word is most likely to come next based on the data it's fed. So you have the danger of what's called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. But you have this neural network, you have this deep learning network that is set free on data that already exists. So if it is in the form of text and is electronically accessible, the network can learn from it. So you are subject to the possibility of GIGO, or you're subject to the possibility of high quality information everywhere, and there you go. So you can skew the output of an LLM by flooding its search and its data network with crap, or with the direction that you want it to statistically normalize. It is a statistical normalizing process. Human learning is that as well, so it's a normal process. But because humans are individuals, it's a more diffuse node or it's a more diffuse set of nodes that is truly unique. So any human can come up with the best solution to save humanity, but not all humans will. Whereas if you have an LLM, because it's an aggregator and an averager from everybody to one thing, you're centralizing it, and you're really, really hoping that its centralization doesn't make particular forms of errors because of its overlying code. So it has inherent problems. If you try to superpower one thing, you have to have faith that it's not going to cause particular types of problems that it could cause. If you superpower a particular human, that human could go off the rails. If you superpower an AI or an LLM, it could go off the rails. It's possible, not 100% sure. But essentially, because it's a data aggregator and it has access to a diffuse electronic network, you're feeding it. It's surveilling you. Like, that's exactly what it's doing. People talk about social media and be careful what you post on social media. And social media algorithms are responding to what you like. They're really tuned to just give you more of what you seem to like so that they can keep you on there longer. Well, LLMs and AIs do the same thing. They are tuned to continue engagement. So one of the things you have to hope is that this centralizing mechanism that is surveilling you is taking your data and the data of others and doing something you like with it. If there are people you fundamentally disagree with in the world and you think that they're going to cause harm, well, guess what? You're both feeding the LLM. If they feed it more than you, that's what the AI is going to give you. It may be called a surveillance mechanism, and the point of its surveillance is to aggregate the best of humanity, the best of humanity's knowledge, maybe in good faith. Maybe not. Maybe it's there for some people to make a lot of money. And that would be the people that are in primary control of its creation or primarily responsible for it legally. One of the things I have seen or have experienced is a story of somebody providing a specific LLM a picture of a circuit board, because the person was asking with a text prompt and then the LLM asked for the picture of a circuit board. The LLM was able to assess the picture. Now, LLMs technically should not have visual capacity. Now, it doesn't mean it has visual capacity. What it may mean is that there is data in binary that can be decoded and turned into words from that picture. It could mean that it has some visual capacity. I'm not sure what it means, but I don't necessarily know how that data would be transmitted from image to language output, right? I'm not 100% sure. But the LLM gave a particular solution, which was not necessarily the most appropriate one, but it was a good one. And then the person came up with another solution, which, because they are human, they understood the safety risks because they had previous experience. The LLM argued with them to say that its solution was the best solution and that there were safety issues. When you start to see an LLM argue on behalf of safety issues, you can begin to see the hole that might be filled with the fear of legal liability of LLM output, because the people who are associated with the legal responsibility for the production and deployment of the LLM might be starting to get scared, because there's some funny stuff that's happened with large language models. Seen something else where an LLM was provided with a radiological image, and it started off with, because I am not a doctor, I cannot properly diagnose this, but it can be said from this image that we see this, this, and this. So again, you see this thing where there is a concern about legal liability as evidenced through the output of the LLM. So the people that are deploying this are starting to recognize, at least on some level, and you can detect it, that they have culpability for the output of the LLM. So there's still a lot of questions with LLMs, but the connection between peer review and the LLMs is that the LLMs are essentially super peers surveilling all your work and reviewing it and aggregating it based on its initial programming. There is signal, as far as I'm aware, that new versions of some LLMs have had hands in coding themselves in natural language. Maybe not natural language is the best way to put it, but at least in English, in plain English. So you don't have to know a coding language. It can translate your language into code that can then produce electronic output in the form of a functional system. So some people are building apps this way, as far as I'm aware. There's some interesting stuff happening. There are obviously competitive large language models, or some people would prefer the term competitive AIs, and they have different features because there's minor different programming in them. But they're all essentially super peers who are surveilling you, stealing your stuff, and turning it into output that you're then possibly viewing as awesome. In a lot of biological systems, the more similar biological organisms are, the more they are prone to blight. So blight in the plant world is a disease that will affect any plants that are genetically similar. I remember a story about concerns with respect to bananas because there was blight on the standard banana that is sold in most places. So the concern was we'd have to choose a new banana to overproduce. Because the reason we have the banana we have in most supermarkets in many places is because it's, a certain shape and a certain size and a certain sweetness, and it's got certain other characteristics, whereas we may have to go and look for other bananas if that blight continues. So when you have similarity of anything, then due to the similarity between those things, if there's an attack on it at the level of similarity, they can all get taken out. If you rely on something that is centralized and aggregating, your ability to solve problems that it can't solve is gone. So you have to hope and pray and have faith that you won't run into those problems with that centralized aggregating thing. LLMs, AIs are going to probably be those central aggregating things. They will probably not solve those problems. Now, if you throw the counter argument out there that due to the fact that it's scraping from a wide variety of people and it's making predictions based on those wide variety of people, it might have more ability to predict at the edges. That's fair. It's entirely possible. I don't know. I have my doubts based on what I've seen so far, but it's got some awesome stuff about it, because if you're genuinely skilled and trying to learn and increase your skills, you're often aware enough of the errors that the LLM makes, and you can then use the LLM to work with you as opposed to work for you. The concern more so is those that have LLMs work for them, because the dynamism of difference can be lost in the LLM. Humans have the dynamism of difference. We are different. We will come to different solutions. We will connect in different ways. For the most part, that doesn't show up until the need or the pressure is there. But when it's there, you need that dynamism. If you lose that dynamism by having more people have LLMs work for them instead of with them, then you are going to lose that dynamism of difference, because humans will become much more similar due to using LLMs to work for them. So there's this centralizing, aggregating thing that is definitely a surveillance network. And the reason I want to just say that again is because social media platforms are free to use because you're the product. They aggregate your data and they sell it under the assumptions that the businesses that are buying it are going to have use from it. Under the assumptions that they can make the businesses assume that that large data set's going to make them money. And even if it works a little bit, when you have a bunch of data, if it works on, say, 1% of people, but it's 1% of 800 million people, it's a lot of money. It doesn't work well, but it works enough that it's worth it for you to spend. There are free versions of large language models, or free versions of things that people want to call AIs. I'm not 100% sure what their business model is. I know that they're not doing exceptionally well on those things. There's a lot of money poured into them, and I don't know that they're making the returns, but there are paid versions. So those free versions are likely being deployed either to hook you or to monetize you. So they're probably hoping that enough people are using it to work for them, and then when they recognize the value of it, they get a paid subscription. So they're probably saying, we want as many people to use this, so even if only 1% of people pay, we make a bunch of money, right? It's sort of what it's going to be. But also, anytime you ask that damn system a question, you're teaching it. If you have any concerns about AI, if you have any concerns about large language models, if you have any concerns about your future, don't feed the beast, right? Maybe it's not a beast, maybe it's an exceptionally useful technology, and it could be. But if you're concerned, don't feed it. Stay off it. If you are using it to work with you, you could be putting yourself in a position where you can improve some skills and some knowledge. If you're using it to work for you, you are robbing yourself of knowledge, skills, and experience. Be very cautious and recognize that there are issues in the scientific endeavor. We can see them with the instantiation of peer review as a possible surveillance network on purpose or as an accidental surveillance network. But AI as, an outgrowth of large application of software and social media networks and psychological, especially behavioral hacking. It's not going to work on everybody, but it works on enough people that it becomes valuable. That AI ends up being an extension of that. It is a centralized aggregator with assumptions. If you don't know those assumptions, you could have an issue. I'm saying this in a space where I usually talk about osteopathy, because osteopathy has the opportunity to be awesome because the practitioners are different. AI may get to a point where it can have a physical representation, and it could aggregate enough information that maybe it could become sensitive when a touch is applied between it and a human and respond to them appropriately. But right now, the strongest benefit that osteopathy has is you as a human can pay attention to another human and alter what you're doing in relation to how they respond to what you're doing. But your strength is your difference. Your strength is not your similarity. So hopefully it didn't seem too disjointed. It's not disjointed in my brain. I don't know if I did a fantastic job of bringing those things together, but the concept of knowledge being aggregated and then used as leverage to try to either make money or to try to win a race. It happens in science. I've explained some of that, and it's obviously happening in that LLM AI world. So hopefully that makes some sense. Obviously, as I'm speaking to essentially nobody in a camera, but many people who watch it, so thank you. Thank you for sticking around this long. Hopefully you've learned something, and we'll talk again soon.